Hi, everybody. Welcome to a great episode of the Prog Report podcast. We're going to do another top 5 episode, and we have a very special guest, as you can see, Mr. Ross Jennings.
Hello there.
Hello, Ross.
Thanks for having me. This is really cool.
It used to be just Haken. Now it's Haken, it's Novena, it's a solo record, it's Virgilio Morrison and Jennings, or whatever the order of that is. I forget. But you're a busy guy, so I'm glad you got 5 minutes to join us on this, man. Happy to have you on here.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure. Thank you. Yeah, I've been spreading my wings a little bit and branching out.
Yeah, very cool. And of course,
not keeping still, you know.
Well, we like to say, of course, Jeff Bailey. That's how we introduce him.
Of course. Thank you.
Jeff is very busy these days, so it's hard to get him back on the podcast these days
not.
Lately.
I wouldn't have missed this one.
But no, this is going to be fun. So we're going to do a top 5 debut solo albums list between the three of us, and that's because we're going to talk about Ross's exciting new solo record, Shadow of My Future Self, which you can see right there behind me. It comes out November 19th. There's been a bunch of singles released already, and it's a very eclectic record, all sorts of styles. It's not metal, it's not prog metal, but it is very cool. And we want to talk to you about all that before we get into the top 5. So I guess we should start with all of that. Like, what has the last year and a half been like for you? And when during that period did you decide to start working on this record, and what got you going with it?
Yeah, as you can imagine, when the last shows I did with Haken were we were midway through the US run of the Devon Townsend tour, so Haken was first support, and that got cut short when we arrived at Nashville, and we were plummeted into that situation and had to get home, and cost us a lot of money, and it was all very depressing. But so as you can imagine, like all those emotions that flared up at that time, and it happened for everybody really, and a lot of artists were feeling this and responding to it. So it was pretty much an immediate thing, actually. Within weeks of being home, I just dove straight into these demos, and I had a few kind of tracks that I'd always been playing around with myself before, which never had a place, and so that's when I decided to form this thing.
Cool. And I suppose we're talking about solo albums, and it's been interesting looking through some choices of albums to find those things that are sort of a very natural extension of what people do in their bands, and some that are, the opportunity to do something very, very left field. I mean, your album, it has a very different style from what people who would be used to listening to Haken would be familiar with. Did you envisage your solo album would be something like that?
Yeah, I actually started out, I wanted to do some sort of country album, and I had a good 3, 4, 5 songs maybe that were very blatantly sort of American country, mainstream radio,
Wow.
And it just wasn't. It didn't. Although I had fun with that, it didn't seem that authentic actually, and I felt like it needed to be something a little bit more, have a little bit more meat on the bones. So, I just I evolved those demos and wrote some more stuff, and I had this flurry of inspiration that just kept coming at that time. It was very bizarre.
How many of those initial country songs were about trucks and beer? That's what country music is here.
Mostly about relationships, actually, but that theme kind of stuck, actually, with this record in the end. So there's a lot of stuff about navigating through dark times in a relationship and losing loved ones and things like this. So it stayed very true to that country rock theme of telling stories and things that are relatable.
Yeah.
Totally. And the other thing, I suppose, seeing you with Haken, you're down the front, you have only a mic stand as company. On this album, you play a lot of guitar. So what was it like taking all of that on?
Yeah, that was a really important thing for me on this record, to do that, because that was my first instrument really before I was a singer. at some point I put the guitar down and focused on being a vocalist. So it was a really good opportunity for me to dust off the cobwebs of playing guitar and brush up those skills a little bit again. And yeah, it was a lot of relearning actually. I was a bit rusty at first, but I'm really proud of what I put down in the end. I've been surrounding myself with these really great players for the last 10 years, so there naturally was a lot of pressure to kind of up my game for my target audience, but I felt it worked for the style of music I was doing in the end.
And I mean there's great acoustic playing, there's some funky stuff, there's a lot of heavy riffs. I mean, it's not like you kind of picked it up and stuck to one thing. You've really bridged the styles in the guitar playing as well.
Yeah, cool. That's good to hear. Thank you. It's always been. I've always had an affinity with the guitar. It's just obviously keeping up a regular practice schedule was lacking in the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, right.
Sure.
Yeah, that's all it was really. And it was really fun to record properly, professionally guitar again. That's cool.
I mean, the thing with the album that's interesting, and I hope people really get a chance to check it out and listen to it in full, because one, it's a really long record. There's a bunch of songs in there, like 14 tracks, but a lot of variety. And also what I like that you've done, you've released a lot of singles up front with really, really cool videos. The one for Feelings recently was just amazing, and for Violet was really cool. Talk about that whole process and the vision you had for which songs would be singles and having so many, and then the vision for each video that you had also, and how those have come together.
Yeah, so as you can imagine, if we're talking months ago, it wasn't really possible to get into studios and film stuff, easily, because we were all in lockdown. So the initial plan was to do a lot of animated work, and there started the idea of doing the whole computer game theme for Feelings. That was actually intended to be the first single, but the project turned out to be a mammoth one, which went on for months and months, and it shows in the results. It's really well done by Crystal Spotlight. And as time went on, things started to open up, and I was able to do some green screen stuff, kind of one-to-one with a filmmaker. So we had a really cool shoot for the Violet video, and a lot of that came together in post-production. But yeah, we did a whole day of filming on a green screen there. Selecting the singles. I mean, as you mentioned, it's a long album, and there was quite a long lead up. We're still a month away from the release. I'm not sure when this is airing, but at the time of filming this with you, we're still a month away from the release. So I had to kind of come up with a structure of rolling out singles and keeping people engaged and interested. So I didn't have a problem with sort of releasing the bulk of the material up front. I mean, that was important because I'm a new artist essentially to a lot of people as a solo artist. So the more time people have with that stuff, I felt that was important.
Yeah, I would definitely tell people to go check out the videos, and one of them was done by Daniel Levy, one of our regular Prog reporters, who did the video for Grounded, which is a cool lyric video type thing, and but Violet is really cool, and Feelings, I mean, it's an actual video game they made for you where you're running around.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm going to talk to them about actually having this available to play and be interactive. but essentially, yeah, the way that they filmed it was playing the game with me. The avatar was me, so that's so cool. Yeah,
really neat.
Yeah, no, it's great, and no, I love the album. I mean, the thing that really strikes me about the album is there's a huge diversity of styles, but every song I think is so solid in the melody department. And I think that sometimes when we talk about prog as a whole, sometimes people are very into the length of a song or the technicality of it, and sometimes melody gets lost. I think that's a really important thread. I mean, notable in the singles as well, but really throughout the album, I think that's something that's really stand out about it, that no matter what style it's in, it's about the song. And you did a live stream show recently where you played then a number of those in more of a stripped back format. How did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, so the birth of these songs really started that way. It's just me in this room strumming away, and and coming up with this stuff. So it was quite natural, really, to perform that stuff stripped back. And again, that was largely due to the restrictions of not being able to be near anyone. Just did a solo show, you know. So yeah, that was really cool. I had intended to put that out after the release of this record so that people were more familiar with the material, but as things kind of transpired in the end, that the release date was obviously pushed much further back to this year. So I just decided to take the plunge and just put that out.
And you have some solo shows coming up in the UK and one in Israel, which is pretty cool. So talk about those.
Yeah, so again, when these were being planned, no one was sure if there's going to be tours with full bands playing at all. You know, so we booked the shows as acoustic solos performances, and having the live stream already out there, it was a kind of a launch pad for that. But yeah, obviously now bands are going out there in full capacity now, so it's a kind of regret because I wanted to do this with a full band, but I think there's time for that, and I'm sticking with the solo format for these shows. I think it's going to be quite unique and fun as well, and intimate. We're gonna a couple of guys that are in the band that perform on the record are in the States, so I'd like to do it with them. Essentially, if possible, and that's going to be a while before we can put that together. So
cool. Well, of course, as well as the solo album, there's a new Novena EP, and then recently announced an album with Neil Morris and Nick DiVirgilio. And what can you tell us about those projects at this point?
So it's just the lack of ability of sitting still, really, and just wanting to produce music constantly. But obviously with the Novena, there's other members who are driving that project forward as well. So that was on the cards for quite a while, and it's an extension of the 11th Hour album that we'd put out last March, and March 2020, I should say. So yeah, that's. If you're familiar with that record, that's a really good one to get your teeth into, because there's lots of kind of references to the album, and there's a beautiful ballad on there, and a really cool progressive metal song, which is kind of akin to the Novena stuff and the Haken stuff. So yeah, if you're hearing this solo album of mine and you're missing a bit of the time signatures. Then head to Novena, because it's really good stuff.
And is that EP just on streaming? Is that?
Yeah, it's digital only. That's
great. It's killer, man. It's only 3 songs, but it's fantastic. It's really cool stuff.
It's really good.
And there's a Billie Eilish cover on there as well,
which is great. I don't like Billie Eilish, but that cover I'll listen to.
And then there's the trio album then coming up.
So that's another one that came out of the blue for me, was receiving an email from Neil Morse asking if I'd like to be part of this trio project, and it must have been a leap of faith on his part, because the only real point of reference for him is this prog metal band Haken, really, and the style of music that he wanted to do for this was a little bit more stripped back, a little more sort of inspired by Crosby, Stills and Nash and some of the old country scene. So I mean, that immediately floats my boat, so I was on board without hesitation, and with Nick involved, it's like somewhat of a Spock's Beard reunion. So to be in the middle of that is just so bizarre for me, because I'm such a fan. It took a lot for me not to come across as a bit of a fanboy at first, but so honoured to be asked, honestly, and I think we created something really special.
So I'm curious, actually, do you get a phone call or email like before saying, listen, Neil Morris might call you because he's interested, or literally out of the blue one day an email from Neil just pops up on your phone?
No, it was 3 days after Christmas Day, at the end of 2020. I got an email, just an email popped up, Neil Morse. Hey,
Yeah,
I
that's
got
crazy,
your
right? Like,
got your
hey,
email address
like
from
you
the
weren't
record
even
label,
expecting that, and all of a
yeah.
sudden, you know.
I was the greatest Christmas present of all. Really.
That's pretty cool, man. That's
Yeah.
exciting. Well, we can't wait for that. That's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. So again, just to recap, Shadow of My Future Self, the solo album is available for pre-order. What's the website again?
You got rjsolo.com. That's probably the easiest one to remember.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of links to O-Merch and various download and pre-order websites.
Yeah, definitely check it out. So videos all over on YouTube and Spotify and all that. And if you're in the UK, catch a couple of shows. You can find out all that info on the website as well, I'm sure. So what we're gonna do is do our top 5 debut solo albums list. We didn't specify that this was gonna be only prog albums or really anything. I think we're all sticking within the rock genre, and then we'll sort of see from there what sort of happens. But let's just see. Considering Ross's album is a bit more pop rock, alternative, whatever else is in there, we felt we could open this up a little bit. So Ross, you know the drill. You've seen this before. Why don't you start us off with your first of your 5, your number 5 pick?
Is there a specific order to this, or can it be start from 5 to the best? Or
Correct. Well, that's five to
tricky.
1. But so just do your 5, and then Jeff, you'll go, and I'll go, and then we'll go back around and go that way.
It's really hard to put these in any specific order, but I did want to start with one that's probably inspired me to make a solo record myself, and that would be quite an obvious one, actually. This is Face Value by Phil Collins.
Yep, amazing.
And it's quite a special album to me. Obviously, there's some classic songs on there. In the Air Tonight being the opening track, and one that's very well known. Projected him to a lot of fame in the solo world, anyway. Yeah. We're all fans of Genesis, but I felt like this, as I'm doing the solo stuff, moved away from the classic prog genre and did it in a very effective way and very successful way as well. So, absolutely. One that's been in my collection for a very long time, from a very young age, and obviously I was born in '84. This one predates me even, but it's been around longer than I have. It's a couple of special tracks on this for me. If Leaving Me Is Easy, I think
song.
That was a single.
So
I think. Obviously, again, I wasn't born, but that's probably one of my favourite tracks on this record. So such a powerful ballad, and the use of dynamics on that track is just breathtaking. Absolutely love it. Yeah. There's obviously the Beatles cover at the end, which is a really cool rendition of Tomorrow Never Knows from the Revolver album. I've actually put a cover at the end of my record as well, which not a Beatles cover, it's a Dua Lipa cover. But again, another a pop cover. So there's links to the album I've put out. And there was an inclusion of a Genesis song, Behind the Lines. And I'm a bit vague on whether which one came first. Actually, I didn't look into this, but I'm not sure if this was a Phil Collins original that became a Genesis song or I don't
really remember. Jeff, do you remember?
It did. Yeah. I actually was watching something about the making of the album. I think it was one of those documentaries, and the Genesis version did come first. But I understand the inspiration for that version was that Phil heard the Genesis version put on at the wrong speed.
Right. That's
and he
right.
went,
yeah.
Oh,
okay.
actually, it's speeded up. Sounds quite good. And that developed from there.
Yeah,
I listened. Go ahead. Sorry.
No. Go.
I was going to say, I listened to that album, actually. I think it was maybe texting Roy whenever I was doing it. I listened to that through the big speakers a couple of weeks ago and was just completely blown away because, like you, it's an album that's been in my collection for a long time. But hearing, and I suppose if you think of what happened to Phil Collins' solo career in terms of mass appeal, and you listen to that album, and there's so much like stuff that is not, it's not commercial at all.
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
like Hand in Hand and that Shankar, the violin stuff that's going on, and even the Beatles cover, it's not Love Me Do, it's
Sure.
Tomorrow Never
Yeah, it's a
Knows.
very obscure one. Yeah.
And I suppose you look through and go, there's not, pretty much everything that was a sort of normal standard song with the singles, but there's so much else in there. And even In the Air Tonight, is just, again, I was listening to a thing with an interview Hugh Padgham did, and he talked about, like, basically just about everything from that is from the demo, because they couldn't recreate it, so they just ripped it all off the demo and put it on there. And then, of course, the story with the drum sound, so yeah,
I would agree
Drum
with you.
fill,
Like,
it's one of the most famous drum fills of all time. I mean,
Yeah.
it's amazing. Even to a young generation today, teenagers today, they know that song and they know that drum fill, and I think that's just so cool. But you go back to that period when that comes out, you can't imagine that song's going to be what it becomes 40 years later. It's an amazing track, amazing album.
Yeah, this was the thing, and obviously, taking what Jeff said there, it is quite a left field album in some respects, and obviously to us now and the zeitgeist, we assume that this to us this is all commercial stuff now, but back then, at the time, I'm guessing it would have been quite a left field record.
Yeah.
To put out.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Nice pick to kick us off. I'm
worries.
glad somebody has that album on here. Totally makes sense. All right,
Yeah.
Jeff.
Okay. So I tend to be thought of as the Yes guy, and therefore would get reprimanded if I didn't pick something Yes related. So my choice is, again, maybe not what people might expect, but I'm going to go with Rick Wakeman and the Six Wives of Henry VIII. That was his first solo album, and it came out shortly after. I think round about the time that he joined Yes, he signed a solo deal and recorded this sort of in the breaks between Yes stuff. And again, Rick talks about, I suppose, his inspiration for instrumental music being kind of getting a story into his head and just expressing that in a musical way, which is something that's very intangible. But I think as a kind of a concept album, it works pretty well because it's 6 very different pieces of music, and there's no story. It's not a concept album to the extent there's a story that runs through it. There's no vocals, but it moves from everything from a very traditional playing, a church organ, right the way through to lots of the synths, stuff like that. But when I was doing a bit of research, I found that the first pressing, they decided to do 12,000 copies, and within 5 years it had sold 6 million, which I think is just amazing. And we sort of,
That's crazy.
you go to any secondhand record store and you'll find a copy of that album. You sort of think of it as a thing of a bygone age, but I mean, commercially that was a massive album. The other fun fact I have about it is that if you know Fragile by Yes, they have their solo tracks, and Rick's solo track is a version of Brahms' piece, but that's because of the solo deal. He wasn't allowed to put one of his own songs onto it. So actually, the song that is Catherine of Aragon on Six Wives is actually what he was going to put onto Fragile, and it has Steve Howe and Chris Squire playing on it. So yeah, I think Prog Report. What's more prog than the Six Wives of Henry VIII? That has to be in there.
Yeah, very appropriate. And actually, we just did a cool like a Q&A interview with Rick about his U.S. tour and stuff that just posted on the website, so worth checking out. And he's been very kind of high profile lately the last few years. Back on tour, he did the ARW thing, and now he's doing his solo thing. He's hilarious too. So, okay, so I'll go ahead. I don't know, I was having a hard time because I had a whole list of different ones, and they were initially some of the more kind of notable solo albums, like Sting's debut and Peter Gabriel's debut album and things like that, and Phil Collins' Face Value. But I was leaving off a bunch of stuff that I really, really like. And so I'm pulling out a few kind of more obscure choices of mine, and I don't know, maybe prog adjacent, as we like to say, but maybe not so much. We'll see. But my first pick is going to be from a former Genesis singer, but not Peter Gabriel and not Phil Collins. So Ray Wilson, and his first solo album called Change from 2003, which is a few years after he was done with Calling All Stations and his band Stillskin, and kind of finished that. And I don't remember when I got that album. I don't know if it was right when it came out, but I was one of the people that loved Calling All Stations. I loved his voice. And being a huge Phil Collins fan, I was sort of, initially struggling with that, but I was like, you know what? This is actually really good. I really like this guy. An amazing singer. And then, of course, that ended and he went away. And out of nowhere, a few years later, I stumbled upon this solo record. I was like, oh, cool. Let me see what this guy's up to. And it's just an album that blows me away, and I love it. And I've become a massive fan of his ever since. I think he's one of the best singers in the world, and he still puts out really, really cool music. He just put out an amazing album this year called The Weight of Man, which I highly recommend. Again, he's never gone completely as prog as what Calling All Stations was, but there's always sort of a tiny hint of it here and there musically. But he's just a great songwriter. He's got just a really cool kind of deep voice. But on Change, it's a heavily acoustic record, but just gorgeous kind of orchestration with it and harmonies, and just the songs are killer. So I felt like I wanted to give that album a shot because it's really one of my favorites. And I mean, the opening track, Goodbye Baby Blue, is just insane. And the song Change is amazing. And yeah, stuff I still actually listen to. So if you don't know that album, I recommend Ray Wilson music like crazy. And that's a good place to start.
I actually don't know that album, and obviously I'm familiar with Ray Wilson from Calling All Stations and Stiltskin. I really loved that band actually back in the day.
They were cool.
But I knew this podcast was going to cost me money in checking out new records, so I knew it.
Yeah, he's great. You're not familiar like with his last few solo albums, like the stuff he's done?
No, I'm not.
Oh man, you'll love it. It's great, especially knowing what you've done on your solo album. Yeah. Like you'll totally dig it.
Oh, apologies to Ray if he's listening. Yeah, I will definitely check it out.
There's a really good compilation as well. I can't remember what it's called, but
came out a few years ago.
Well, with Genesis having cancelled their Irish shows as of last week, it may well be that the only Genesis live show that I was able to see was on that tour, and it was a brilliant show. I mean, setting aside Phil not being there, but if as a band they were just absolutely phenomenal, and they played probably a more career spanning set than they probably could in any other guys. Really, really good show. So
he still plays, oddly enough, and I don't know how this sits with Genesis fans, but I feel like he thinks it's something that he could do. He is a former member of the band for whatever it's worth, but when he performs, he does a selection of different Genesis songs. He still plays Mama and some different things. He plays Salisbury Hill. He plays, he does like, what's it? Another Day in Paradise, I think is one he does from Phil's solo record. So he mixes in a bunch of different things, which is cool. I think that's really neat. All right, Ross, back to you.
Yeah, I'm going to go to, this is absolutely one of my favorite singers. And I'm just going to throw it up here. This is Guy Garvey. This is his debut and only solo record, I believe. He's the lead singer of Elbow. This is a band I have much love for, and the material that's actually on this record is it could have well been an Elbow record, to be honest. So it's kind of weird because you kind of want that to be part of their repertoire, but it's Guy Garvey's album. So if you're a fan of Elbow, definitely check this out. He's one of the most captivating voices, and to me, and one of the best lyricists. Actually, very obscure lyrics he comes up with, and not always easy to follow and understand. When you have to go to a show, and typically he'll explain what the song's about before he starts the song. But yeah, this is an absolutely phenomenal record. One of the funniest moments on it, I think it's in Belly of the Whale, there's a track on here, and where his brass band start they kind of fall into this Careless Whisper rendition, which goes really badly. It's this very obscure moment in the song, but yeah. So it's a brilliant record. I'm not sure how successful it was really. I think it went under a lot of people's radars, to be honest. But yeah, if you haven't sort of checked it out and you're a fan of Elbow, do so, because it's absolutely brilliant.
I'm not familiar with him. I mean, I've heard of Elbow, obviously, and I know a couple of songs, but that's a band I need to get more into.
Are they big in the States, really? Or...
I've seen them on tour here and stuff. I don't know how big they are.
They're a huge band in the UK now. Do large headline shows at the O2 Arena here, and
wow, cool.
If we're talking London, they play on their British heritage a lot, so that might be something that sort of stops them or prevents them from becoming huge stars in the US. But I don't know. Yeah, they're a northern band from Manchester, UK. And,
well, I mean, chances are I'll like them.
But yeah, one of the most soothing voices and unique voices in the business at the moment. So cool. Yeah, Guy Garvey courting the squall, I should say.
Yeah, I must admit. I mean, I certainly listened to Elbow. I didn't actually know he had a solo album. But I guess Peter Gabriel whenever Peter Gabriel did that covers album, didn't he do? What did he do?
Which one was it now? I know that Peter Gabriel did Mirrorball, and then I think Elbow did a track of his, but I forget.
Was it? I think he did Mercy Street. Was it?
Oh, it could have been.
There's a fantastic whatever version of Peter Gabriel he did is a fantastic. I'm pretty sure. I'm trying to look through my iTunes here to see if I can find it, but I can't. But I'm pretty sure it's Mercy Street. Brilliant band.
Cool.
But I didn't know that, so that's cost me. That's an album.
Yeah, nice one.
Okay, so
right,
we're evening up.
Well.
We're evening up.
All right, Jeff, your next one.
I didn't really do these in a top 5 order, so they definitely aren't. They definitely aren't necessarily my top 5. But okay, my next one. I'm gonna go with, again, I'm gonna keep it quite traditional prog for the meantime. Kerry Livgren. And his album from Kansas, and his album Seeds of Change. So again, I don't know if that's one people are familiar with. I'm guessing possibly not, but I love Kansas. This one came out between Monolith and Audio Visions, which was the last one with Steve Walsh, and this is round about the time when Kerry Livgren kind of became a Christian, and so a lot of his lyrics kind of went in that direction, and it probably meant that kind of Steve Walsh and him kind of parted ways. But I mean, all of that said, it's a really brilliant album, and musically, Kerry plays the guitar, Kerry plays keyboards, and the playing on it is brilliant. The songwriting is as you would expect, and it's probably one of those albums I like more because it's not so well known. There's a track hidden away in there called How Can You Live, which actually is one that Steve Walsh sings. And, I think it's a better track than most of what Kansas produced in the albums round about that time. And the other thing I love about it, two of probably the strongest, most familiar tracks, or if people have heard it. So, despite going down this Christian route, he decided to get the then lead singer of Black Sabbath, Ronnie Dio, to sing 2 of the songs. And they're absolutely, there's one called, I'm trying to remember now what they're called, To Live for the King, which is just absolutely fantastic. And the Dio songs on it are brilliant. And again, just this total sort of mishmash and clash of styles. And I think one of those things, we talk about solo albums, he clearly wanted to try and do something a little bit different from what he would normally do. So there's some of it that's very Kansas-like, and other bits that are a bit different. So yeah, really, really strong album, one that I like. And I have
to get that from you, because I don't know that record at all.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah. But that's pretty. Cool. That sounds like
I love Kansas.
Yeah, it sounds like would be one I would want to
So
listen to. So
I'm kicking myself that I haven't checked this out.
Yeah.
Yeah. They actually, I think actually even on their last tour, they did a couple of the songs live
Oh, wow.
with Kansas band, which again is a bit unusual for solo artists. But
Yeah.
no, it's a good album. Check it out.
Nice. Very cool. Oh, okay. I think this one's got, my next pick's also going to be one completely weird for you guys. So I don't know if Winger was a big band in UK at all. But you're talking early 90s. That was a big kind of hair metal band, that kind of thing. But phenomenal musicians, Kip Winger, obviously singer, bass player, but Rod Morgenstein on drums and Reb Beach on guitar. And it was really good playing, and bordered on their their album at the time that came out before they sort of took a long hiatus was the album called Pull, which was bordering on progressive. I mean, there's a bunch of 6-7 minute songs with parts, and they started to really show off their skills there, because these are real actual good musicians, but anyway, that was all the time around Nirvana and grunge and everything, and anything that sounded like that just died a quick death the minute it was released. So Kip Winger went and left, and the band disbanded for a while, and he pursued a solo career. And in 97 put out an album called This Conversation Feels Like a Dream. And being a fan at the time, I was like, I'll check this out. I'll see what it's like. And it is one of the coolest albums ever, and one of my favorite things he's ever released. And he's had a few solo records that came out after that, but this was the, debut, so we'll talk about this one. It still has sort of the Winger guys on playing with him. The drums are still Rod Morgenstein, and Reb Beach still makes an appearance, but it is absolutely more in the vein of like Peter Gabriel in every way.
Oh, wow.
And it's just so cool and eclectic, and a lot of acoustic stuff, and nothing remotely what Winger sounded like at all. And I fell in love with this record, and it was like one of those things like in 97, if you walked around holding a solo album by Kip Winger and showing it to people, you may as well have been holding plutonium. And to them it's like, what is wrong with you? Why are you listening to this? But that is where my head was in 97. It was nowhere near grunge. I was listening to Kip Winger solo records.
Nice.
So anyway, I still think it's an amazing album. Now they've come back, Winger, in recent years, and have started to sort of regain a little bit of popularity within that audience and that kind of stuff. And their albums are cool, and they do a lot of weird here and there. They'll throw in a Prog song with weird time signature stuff, and it's cool. I mean, it's really, I have found that a lot of the Prog audience sort of is familiar with Winger and likes them too, because they're good. They are not Motley Crue. They can actually do some really cool things musically. No offense to Motley Crue, who are a great band. But if you like that kind of stuff, and if you wanted Peter Gabriel to be a bit more edgy rock wise, you might like this album. That's the closest kind of thing I can describe, but it's very, very cool. So another shout out there that I'm going to throw in to Kip Winger's This Conversation Feels Like a Dream. Now, you did not expect me to come up with that, I bet.
No, on the basis that I didn't even know it existed. Yeah.
There you go. But we need,
Cool.
after
Sounds
this,
good.
after this, we'll put all these albums in a Dropbox for the three of us, and we can all
Yeah.
listen to
Sounds
everything.
good.
How about
Sounds
that?
good. Well, obviously, I'm aware of Winger and Kip Winger.
Yeah.
I think there's a Jordan Rudess connection as well. I think he
he
sang on.
He
Road
might
Home,
have
was it?
played on, I don't know if it was on this solo record, but he played on one of his solo records, and then
Yeah.
and then I think Kip sang on one of Jordan's as well. I think.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah. Not overly familiar with the material, but I know of them, and I know they're a great band. But yeah, I think from my perspective, I think they're probably one of the bands that should have been much bigger than they were. I mean, I'm not especially.
I mean,
here,
before Nirvana came out, they were all over MTV. They were
Right,
a big,
okay.
big time band, but it was with the whole hair and the whole, girls in the videos and the whole kind of
Yeah.
stuff. Those were the
unfortunately, because of
singles.
my age, I think
Oh, by the time
when-
you were
when-
10, that music was already dead.
it's gone. Yeah, I think
It was-
when Nirvana were around, that was when I started paying attention.
That's
really.
right. And by then you couldn't mention Winger. It was like, the worst thing on earth. But, music comes back around. It always does.
It's great that 30 years later, this stuff can be new to someone, and that's what it's all about, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Discovering
Yeah,
things
exactly.
all the time.
Okay, Ross, your next one.
Oh, sugar. I wasn't ready, but I'll tell you what. I'm going to pick Fish, Vigil in a Wilderness of Mirrors. Now, I'm very guilty in the fact that really this is a relatively new discovery for me. I've been a Marillion fan for as long as I can remember, but for some reason didn't ever explore the solo material of Fish until quite recently, and this was an obvious debut that has sonically a lot of more ties to the Marillion work that Fish was involved with than subsequent Fish releases. I felt anyway. I don't know what something in the production maybe that kind of ties those projects together. But I really love this record, and I think there's some really strong music on this album. Ironically, some of the strongest songs are actually on these bonus tracks on the version I've got. Whiplash, was it The Gentleman's Excuse? Really, really proggy stuff. Listen to it if you haven't heard it, because it's phenomenal playing on there. Big Wedge, I think, was the big single on that record. Again, was I around when this came out? No. Well, this is I was around.
89 was it?
89 was it? Yeah, but I wouldn't have remembered when the release happened anyway. I would have been 5 years old or something. But yeah, upon kind of digging back through his catalogue recently, this album just deserves the accolades that it has, and will continue. I believe he's touring this music. Had planned to tour this music before the pandemic hit.
Is he still planning on touring? I know he said he wasn't going to make any more albums, but did he say if he was going to keep touring?
I believe so, yeah. I think the plan was to do a tour with this record.
It was the last tour, yeah. I think he's done the sort of... He did a Misplaced Childhood tour, and then he sort of did a Clutching at Straws tour, and then I think this was going to be the last one. And then, this plus the Weltschmerz stuff, and then I think that was going to be it. But yeah, it all got kind of put on ice. I think he's still planning to do it. But that was on my
I've
short
taken
list.
one of yours, have I?
It's good. I'm glad it featured.
He's just not an artist I've gotten into because I wasn't listening to it when it was coming out. And then it's one of those things where like you look back and it's such a huge catalog and such intense music. It's like I just never know where to begin to sit and start listening, and I just don't do it. You know what I mean? But I know I should. The stuff I know of Fish is great. And the earlier Marillion I do like. So it's tough. It's one of those things I owe myself to get more into it. I know I do.
So speaking as the old guy, I did live this. Probably got into Marillion. They were on the radio, they were on the TV and that kind of stuff. But I was probably in one of my really hardcore Marillion phases when that came out, and it's totally deserving of being on the list. And the thing that sort of came to mind, I suppose, is a bit like your album, Ross. It's very, very eclectic, and it's not really like Marillion. If you listen to what Marillion did on so they'd made Season's End, which was their first album without him, and you sort of listen to the two albums and go, you can tell this split had to happen because they were both going in different directions, and Fish is sort of I suppose tapped in for the first time to that kind of folky, Scottish Celtic side, that features in various places in it. And the other thing being that he obviously had to, being a lyricist, he wasn't really a songwriter, and he teamed up. I think it's Mickey Simmons is the keyboard player that he wrote most of that with.
Yeah.
there's a real if you know the album well, there's actually a Clutching at Straws special edition that has the album that they attempted to make before they split up, and it kind of has the musical tracks of some of the songs that went on to the Marillion album with the lyrics from some of the Fish album, and if you know them both, it's really weird hearing them put together.
Oh,
That's
wow.
interesting.
But and I mean the title track there, Vigil in the Wilderness of Mirrors, is kind of a real mission statement. Just the way that album starts,
it's a stunning opener.
For someone embarking on a solo career, it's the perfect opening, and it's again, it's got so much going on. The album cover art and everything that was always a consistent theme with what they did. And I think it was. I mean, you talk I think it's Chris Kimsey as well who produced it. Is it? I think. Who would have done the Marillion albums beforehand? But yeah, no, a fantastic album, and I think it's one that's actually a bit. I've watched some of his Fish's broadcasts, and I think there's something to do with this one being tied up with some rights. It's about the only one that he doesn't own at the moment, so it's not really. You talked about only coming across it. I don't think it's probably been properly in release for quite a long time as well. So there we go. Yeah,
engineered and produced by John Kelly.
Oh, John Kelly. Okay, I'm totally wrong.
So that's not your third pick as well, is it, Jeff?
No, well, I've got a longer list, so I can sub something else in. Right. Okay, I'm going to put in Roger Waters, Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking. So this is one that it wasn't initially on my list, but I think whenever we started talking about this, Roy, we were going, there can't be that many, can there? And then you sort of start to go down and go through it and go,
to come up with 5.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So the pros and cons, history, it is Pink Floyd did Animals. Roger went off and wrote 2 things and presented them to the band, one of which was The Wall and one of which was this, and they decided to go with The Wall. Then they did the final cut, and then they split up, and then Roger did this album. And around about that time, the band, the Pink Floyd kind of re-emergence didn't happen to probably 3 or 4 years later, but he put this album together, which is, I suppose, if you think of all the sonic and audio things that go on in Pink Floyd albums, it's a very strange story encapsulating a dream, which I think he had, with all sorts of very strange imagery. Who do you get for your first solo album? Well, you get Eric Clapton, you get Michael Kamen, you get Andy Newmark on drums, you get David Sanborn to play saxophone. It's really like let me do
Roger Waters, you can do that.
Let me do my wish list of it. Who's the biggest saxophone player in the world? Well, David Sanborn. Let's get him. Let's get Clapton. And as you know, Eric Clapton's not somebody who sort of willy-nilly appears on people's albums. The guitar playing on it is brilliant, and it's actually very, very unlike a lot of stuff that, I mean, I'm not a massive Eric Clapton fan, but his playing on it is just absolutely phenomenal. And it's not really full of memorable songs, but as a concept piece, it's really really good fun, and it has that element of humor and seriousness and lightness, and Roger in his finest sort of screaming, whispering, his voice I think vocally it's his very, very best album. And it ends with this brilliant song called Every Stranger's Eyes, which is actually something that you could lift out of the album, and it could be one of those songs that you go, if people knew that song, it would be a standard, so yeah.
It wasn't a big hit. I don't think it did well in the States, if I remember. I mean, I was young at the time, but I don't recall it making a splash like he thought. And then, of course, you had Floyd, coming back and being really big with Momentary Lapse of Reason, and that must have killed him at the time. Yeah.
But no, it's worth checking out. When it's great, it's a 45-minute album. So it's an old style, start to finish.
Nice.
So
yeah,
that
nice
makes
pick.
my list.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
am
one
I
I
up?
had on my short list as well. Actually,
yeah?
I had
Oh,
had
cool.
that ready to
There
go.
you go.
There you go.
But
I
it's a
was
really
going to comment on the cover, but you,
yeah, just
Um,
censor that one.
Okay, I'm gonna continue my trend of obscure records that are remotely related to prog, but not so much. Um, so one of the bands that we've talked about on the podcast many times, and is a favorite of mine, and obviously if you've listened to Portnoy talk, we always talk about Jellyfish as being one of our favorite groups, and certainly has always been one of mine. And the guitarist from the band's first album, Jason Faulkner, after he left the group many, many years later, started a solo career and put out an album in 90, is it 96, I think, called Jason Faulkner Presents Author Unknown. And so that's what I'm going to go with on this one. I don't think it's an album many people know of. It's very, I mean, it's not as much Jellyfish as it is more sort of alternative sounding, way more guitar driven, as you would expect. No harpsichords and, light strings and things that Jellyfish used to do. The production is way more stripped down. A lot of acoustic guitars. If you're familiar with the band The Greys and their one album, Rochambeau, which was also really cool, it's probably closer to that. But just the songwriting is just so brilliant, and Jason is just amazing. And after that he released a few more solo records, and it does so every now and then. I think now he tours in Beck's band as
really?
doing that, and he's just a brilliant musician. It's just one of those things. Like if you like Jellyfish, it's one of those bands because they only released two records, so especially in like the late 90s, it had been a few years since they put out anything, and it was just like anything that remotely touched that world of Jellyfish was like, oh, give me that, I want to hear that, and it was like I had no idea that he had even put an album out. I found out about it like a year later by accident and was thrilled that it was awesome. So again, just I wanted to mention that because I feel like it's probably an album that many people don't know, and we've come to find that Jellyfish is kind of really popular in the prog world. It's one of those, like, along with Supertramp and ELO and that kind of thing, everybody seems to love Jellyfish. So I would highly recommend the Jason Faulkner catalog, but starting with this one.
Cool.
Do you know that one, Jeff, at all? Have you ever heard his stuff?
I think you may have shared that with me at one point.
Maybe.
I certainly have a few of his albums. I can't individually remember that one, but yeah, his stuff is great. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Are you familiar with Jellyfish, Ross? Is that a band that's...
Yeah, I'm familiar with Jellyfish, but only through Mike going on about them a lot. So I subsequently checked them out, and I have both the CDs. In my collection. I don't listen to them a lot, but I really loved what I heard. It's Yes, it's great stuff.
You might dig this guy as well. So another one for you to check out. Okay, down to number two. Your number two.
Number two, I want to obviously my new friend Neil Morse. And his solo
Hey, I was gonna pick that, and I didn't.
I know you were.
Thank you. Good for you,
one
Ross.
of you
I'm
was
glad.
going to do it. You see, for a long time, I was positive that Testimony was the debut. And I think a lot of people might still think that. I'm not sure. Because I'm not sure how well known this is really in the prog world. Because it's essentially not a prog album. But I would argue against that as well, though, because obviously the final 4-part track, The Whole Nother Trip, is very prog. And ties in with Neil's career very fittingly. But as we all know, Neil's a fantastic, prolific songwriter in many styles, and I feel like, just every track on here is such a beautiful piece. Lyrically, very deep and personal. If you guys probably have more facts on this record and how it came about than I do. I've never spoken to Neil about this record. Before.
Well,
But
Jeff, I'm sure knows all the ins and outs of the record. I mean, well, Nick DiVirgilio plays on it, of course.
I was going to mention that. Yeah, that's another thing with Nick on there. That's a kind of ties into the Spock's world, and
I love that album.
Amazing
it was definitely
playing.
on
It's
my,
just such a beautiful album.
yeah,
Every
it
song
was
is
on my
lovely.
list of albums to choose from, but just in the desire to be different than
Yeah.
what we usually pick, I was hoping maybe one of you guys would pick that album, but um,
I
he has
fi-
two of those. He has two of those records. There's one that came out a couple years later called "It's Not Too Late."
Yeah.
I like the one you chose a little bit better because it has that little prog part,
Yeah.
at the end, which is really cool. But the regular songwriter stuff on there is great because I like when he has that sarcastic edge. That song was, I forget what, Lost Cause. It's I'm a
yeah.
loser and that kind of thing, which is really funny. Going Nowhere Fast, where like this
Oh,
this
yeah,
girl
it's-
keeps rejecting him.
It's
I
such an
love.
earworm as well. Nowhere
Yeah,
Fast.
I just
love
think
it.
he has such a knack for writing cool,
Yeah.
different kind of lyrics. And if you could imagine pulling any, like, just one of those songs and sticking them on an earlier Spock's Beard record, and it would have been just fine, because they always had one song that, Waste Away or something that could have seemed sort of more acousticy, but yeah, fantastic record. I mean,
I found that album, back in the days when we bought CDs in shops, and I can remember it was around about the time I just discovered Spock's Beard, and I went to the Spock's Beard section to see if there was anything else that I hadn't got, and I went, oh, somebody's put some random CD in, and then I realized, oh, is that the guy? And it was the classic, where it had the file under Spock's Beard sticker on the CD. And I bought it, and I love that. And in fact, that at Morsefest this year at the Inner Circle show, he did a bit of a feature on some of those songs, played a few of them live for the first time, and the track Landslide on that album is just, again, it's a bit like what I said earlier on. It's a song that you sort of go, if people knew that song existed, it would be a classic, it would be a standard, a very just beautiful piece of writing. And well, I mean, I think we're sort of preaching to the choir here by saying Neil just kind of produces copious volumes of this stuff, and it's all really good, and that album's a brilliant distillation of that whole range of things. So yeah, love it.
Yeah, completely. Great choice there. Jeff,
okay, you're forcing me into the deeper part of my list. So gosh, what am I going to mention next? There's kind of a couple, and I'm sort of holding back to see if anybody else mentions them. And I'm not really doing this in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. But so I'm going to throw out one that possibly is almost as obscure as some of Roy's, albeit that it has a very strong prog connection. So Robert Fripp's first proper solo album, Exposure. So I don't know if either of you know it, but King Crimson break up about 1974. Robert Fripp has lots of hair and little round John Lennon glasses, and he kind of takes a break from things. He works with David Bowie in Berlin. He works with Blondie, and then he comes back with this solo album with him on the cover with a kind of new wave haircut, a skinny tie, and a sort of smart jacket. And I read one of the quotes of it. He says, the album is an investigation of the pop song as a means of expression. Tracks 3 to 4 minutes with words of one syllable. It's not that at all, but it begins with this, the most not Robert Fripp track that you could ever come across. That's called "You Burn Me Up, I'm a Cigarette," and it's like a punk track with virtually no chords apart from this really crazy middle section that just goes back to this kind of heavy strumming guitar. It's sung by Daryl Hall. Wow. So the run of albums, Peter Gabriel's second album, Fripp then produced an album called Sacred Songs, which is a Daryl Hall solo album, which is nothing at all like Hall and Oates. And then he brought him into this, and I think they had a sort of fight with Daryl Hall's record company, who didn't want them associated with it because it's so out there. But a lot of what follows afterwards is sort of in a similar mold to what became King Crimson, the Discipline era stuff. So a lot of that kind of influenced the funkier side. Tony Levin's on the album. But yeah, there's a version of "Here Comes the Flood" on it, which is better than the one on Peter Gabriel's first solo album. Really, to me, it's the definitive version. But a lot of sort of things that point towards the more experimental sort of, or the more King Crimson that he followed up with. But it's got, Brian Eno on it. It's Phil Collins drums on a couple of tracks. It's a very, very eclectic album. It's got all sorts of little bits of sort of spoken. In that "You Burn Me Up," I'm a Cigarette. It's got instead of a guitar solo, it's got like this voice that comes in and just speaks, which is kind of that David Byrne and Brian Eno sort of influence stuff. And I'm trying to remember to get the exact title. One of the best song titles that I've ever come across. Sorry, I'm going to have to look it up to get it exactly right. And it's called, I may not have had enough of me, but I've had enough of you. Which I think is just an absolutely brilliant song title. So Robert Fripp, Exposure, very eclectic album.
Very cool. Yeah, again, one I'm not familiar with, but that's cool. Nice. This is really, we've never had a list put together like this where none of us know the other one's picks at all. All right. I mean, I'll keep going down that road. Well, again, one of the bands that's made a return recently is Tears for Fears, and I'm a big fan. Love those guys. I never thought of them as prog, but I always liked them because they were different in what they did pop wise, and it was more elaborate. And looking back now, when I see them covered in like Prog magazine and stuff, I go, oh, okay, I starting to make sense. I never thought of it that way, but yeah, totally. And again, it's one of those things you find out that Prog fans like them too. I just never knew that was the case. But anyway, I'm a big fan of Roland Orzabal, who's the main songwriter and singer, and for a few years was Tears for Fears because Kurt Smith, the other guy, was out of the band. And in 2001, he released his only solo record called Tomcats Screaming Outside, and just an amazing record. And if you know of Tears for Fears from mid 90s with Elemental and Raúl and the Kings of Spain, this album is pretty much along those lines. I don't know why he didn't call it Tears for Fears. It is basically the same thing. Maybe a little bit more electronica in it, but I don't think anybody would have said, hey, you can't put this out as Tears for Fears. And again, another Nick DiVirgilio connection, who plays drums on it. It seems like he plays drums just on about every record we all own. And but it's
him or Portnoy.
Him or Portnoy, they play on pretty much every album. But it's such a cool album. I love the songs on here. His production style and his use of weird keyboard sounds and little things that just sneak into songs. He'll put like a 3-note melody in there in the background, and it becomes like the only thing you remember is like that 3 notes repeating in the background of the second verse. I just think his attention to those kind of details are so cool, and what I always like about what he does. I remember this was peak Napster time with dial-up download speed, so it was like the only way I could get this album at the time, because it wasn't out in the States yet, was like it took me like a week to download this record one song at a time, and it was amazing. Kids today have no idea of the trials and tribulations we went through to get songs.
Steal your music.
Yeah, but the crazy story about this record was that it came out first in Europe and UK, and then was due to be released on 9/11 in 2001, and did come out that day, and obviously, for obvious reasons, no one ever heard of it again. Like, it just disappeared from existence, and it is not even in print now, I don't believe. So it's it's not on Spotify, it's not anywhere. Maybe one of those things that maybe it's on YouTube or eBay or something, but I think it's a fantastic record. So if you didn't know it existed, you know, maybe now you do, but it's really, really cool. So that, you know, another one there I'm throwing in there.
Cool. Yeah, you've shared that one with me as well. So I had a bit of a Tears for Fears kick there a couple of months ago. Really, yeah, enjoyed it. But I agree with you. I mean, it's really good. Don't know why he particularly felt to put that as a solo album, but I guess that happens.
You know, I'm wondering maybe if it wasn't just a record company contract issue or something like that, where he couldn't make, you know, didn't want to make another record under Tears for Fears, or couldn't, or, you know, who knows. You know, sometimes that kind of stuff comes into play.
It is the tough thing with solo records is getting that attention, because everyone know. I mean, we've seen it with this list so far. Everyone knows the bands very well, but have not necessarily heard the particular solo record that we're talking about, and it's just the way things are, unfortunately. But
yeah, absolutely. Which is why we have to let people know about your solo album, Shadow of My Future Self, which comes out on November 19th. All right, Ross, your last choice.
Oh, so it depends. Do you want to go obvious or not? I think we'll go kind of obvious. I've been a Porcupine Tree fan for a very long time, and Steven Wilson's debut solo album seems like the obvious choice. I'll be completely honest with you and say I had preferred his later music as a solo artist. It took me quite a long time to get into this, actually, with the exception of a few obvious tracks. I mean, Harmony Korine was the sort of the go-to one, the opening track. I think he played that on a lot of shows. But giving this one a lot more dedication and time, I actually came to really enjoy this record. I don't have a lot of facts on this behind the scene, other than just that I've played it a lot. I've enjoyed it.
Well, I think it came out before the incident. Is that right?
I believe it came out before the incident, so it wasn't like a departure.
Yeah.
The solo record, from what I understand. It does feel like it falls in the net of the Porcupine Tree, or at least where Steven Wilson's head was at the time. Particularly what the company was making.
You know,
but at the same time, it's a little bit more obscure and indie and less accessible. I think what was the one before? Was it Dead Wing that came before?
Fear of a Blank Planet.
Sorry, yeah. A little bit more underground than that one.
I mean, I think it like you were saying, Jeff, about Fish and Marillion hearing the records and realizing that they needed to split. I sort of get that vibe with this solo record as well, because it starts to get a little bit out there. It's a hard listen for me. I'm with you. I mean, I started to like Grace for Drowning, became a little bit easier to listen to, and I like that. And then Raven is one of my favorite albums ever. And he started to write stuff that is a little bit more accessible. Insurgentes is a weird album, you know, except for really the first song.
It requires dedication.
And so I couldn't see Porcupine Tree putting that record out, those guys playing that record. And I think he realized I want to do what I want to do.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
You know.
But as with all his records, it's the sonically phenomenal. And if you've got the 5.1 mix or whatever Atmos mixes might be available, I don't know. But yeah, I've got the 5.1 mix here, and it's just, as with all of his records that he puts out in 5.1, it's just such an experience. And that's what I take from this.
But, you know, it's an amazing thing with an artist like that. And I think for some musicians, Peter Gabriel being an example or whatever, just Porcupine Tree was so big at the time when he decides, I don't want to do the same music that everyone likes. I want to do something no one's going to like, and fuck it, you know? And it's an amazing way to think about your own career, and kudos, you know, if you can do that.
I think that's been a theme of most of his career, really. I mean, I totally, like I'm with you, Ross. I love the 5.1s, and that's a really, really good one. All of his pretty much are in their own way. Have you seen the movie? There's a movie that goes with it.
Don't believe I have. No.
That he put out, and it's sort of him going around doing things like buying iPods and blowing blowing them up because he hates them so much, and sort of taking them to shooting range and stuff like that. It's very strange film, but yeah,
I must check that out.
Yeah, no, look that one up. It's
Yeah.
strange, but if you like the music's all the way through it.
But what I also
and
love,
it does touch upon like some of the stuff he talks about, because like there's like the bass communion, the droney type stuff that I don't know if you ever heard his solo stuff that's that, and he sort of explains how he's kind of bringing those influences that weren't part of the Porcupine Tree world into that album. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
I like how he just the visuals that accompany the records. I mean, even the album cover on this, it's so like intense when you see that cover, and it continues on that whole kind of visual element that Porcupine Tree always had, which is always so cool. And that's he really plays into that aspect of his records, which is really cool. All right. So wait, Jeff, your last pick.
Okay. Well, I think that I'm actually glad of that choice, because it leaves me with an album that probably I would say is almost certain. I mean, I didn't really do this in order, but this is almost certainly a #1 solo album, I think. The first Peter Gabriel album, and it's kind of a bit of a goes without saying album for me. I think I wrote an article maybe once for the website about it, which has all sorts of minutia in it. But again, it's the post-split album. It's the let's try a whole lot of different things, from barbershop to blues to the moribund, the Burgermeister, the strange voices, to, again, a bit like Fish, with Vigil, Salisbury Hill being the sort of the mission statement song, and all sorts of wonderful things come to mind, like how the rhythm track in that is the drummer hitting a telephone directory with a drumstick. But just a brilliant song, a brilliantly diverse album. I mean, incredible production from Bob Ezrin, and orchestras, everything but the kitchen sink, and yet it really stands up as a journey, and certainly put him on a very clear footing, and a bit like what I said about Fish and Marillion, not an album that you would listen to and go, oh yeah, Genesis would have done that, because they just wouldn't have. No. So yeah, artistically great, and a brilliant album.
Amazing. Yeah, I was hoping you'd pick that one too, because it was on my short list. The funny thing about that record, I think, is that the one song, if you're splitting up from Genesis and you're going out on your own, then the very first song on that album is the only song that could have been in Genesis, right? It sort of sounds like a leftover from Lamb a little bit, the Moribund song. Sorry, but
the rest of the album. You've read my article, haven't you?
The rest of a while ago. The rest of the album, though, no two songs are the same at all. Every song is a completely different style, and I like the version of Here Comes the Flood on it. I like the big orchestration and the whole thing with it. I think it's amazing. But it's just a brilliant, amazing debut record.
Yeah. And Salisbury Hill being obviously such a tune.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite songs.
What a cool, such a catchy song with such a lyric about that's like everything, you know what I mean? Just describing that torture that he didn't know what to do and all that, but it's such a happy song. It's amazing. Yeah. It's really cool. All right, so you guys brilliantly helped me out with a few choices that I didn't have to pick. So I'm going to go with what I had written down, which was another sort of a one-off solo album from one of my all-time favorite bands, ELO, and I'm going to go with Jeff Lynne's Armchair Theater from '90. So again, sort of pseudo prog adjacent, but not really. And amazing, just an amazing album. Um, I remember listening to it when it even came out really young and just being obsessed with this record. And every little thing is just so cool. And Lift Me Up is amazing. And Now You're Gone. And the whole album. And it's really different. It's not very ELO, except the harmonies and sort of the production is very ELO, but there's a lot of different kind of styles on it. There's some stripped back stuff. There's some of that kind of uh, Elvis-y kind of, style that he likes to throw in there that he does in a cool way. But I mean, I don't even know if it's also in print anymore either. It's one of those albums that sort of came out 100 years ago and sort of disappeared from existence, but it's amazing. It's such a great solo record. And then he never did another one. He did one solo album recently, which was sort of uh, a kind of a 50
Covers.
covers
Yeah.
thing,
Right.
but never did another one of these again and just went headfirst into production in the 90s. And that's, worked with Tom Petty and did the Traveling Wilburys and did the Beatles anthology thing and just became like this insanely, ridiculously famous producer. But I
That
wish he
did
would have
come
done another
after.
album.
That did come after a lot of his production. I think that came probably after the Wilburys, but I think it was one of those albums when it came out where you think he could have gone the sort of superstar, Jeff Lynne and his Famous Friends album,
Right,
but
yeah.
he kind of avoided that and just I mean, the songs on it are fantastic, and it's production wise, it's a lot less over the top than maybe some of the some of the stuff. Very very much him, but a really really good collection of songs, a really good album.
Yeah. I love that record a lot. And so, yeah, I'm really happy with the albums we covered here. This is great. I mean, certainly not going with Phil Collins or Peter Gabriel or Neil Moore. Those are struggles to leave off my list, but I'm like, they're going to cover those. I'm just
Well, I've
going
got
to
my honorable mentions. Fish Out of Water, Chris Squire. Again, I only wanted to include one Yes album. Voyage of the Acolyte, Steve Hackett.
I had that one on my
really
list
like.
as well. Yeah.
And the first David Gilmour album, I
Yeah.
dropped it in favor of the Roger album. But it's a solid album. It's not the most exciting album, but if you like David Gilmour, it's a good 45 minutes of him. And it would be too prog adjacent to call out Plastic Ono Band, McCartney, and All Things Must Pass, albeit the three of them are three absolutely amazing albums.
The reason why I didn't go with any of those is because they're not my favorite album by any of them. So I really wanted to, I like a lot of other McCartney albums better than the debut, as amazing as it is. So, I really didn't want to go that way, but certainly I had Sting on my list. What's one I thought of including, but it's completely not. I don't know if it would have fit at all, but the debut Ozzy solo record, which is
Well, you went Winger, so
almost.
Ozzy's not that much.
But I mean, that's an amazing,
but it's a classic
all-time
album. Yeah, for
classic
sure.
album.
What was your long list, Ross?
Well, I had John Anderson's as a backup.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that record.
Yeah.
Tom York from Radiohead, his debut
Oh yeah.
experimental
Right.
solo album. And then two completely not prog albums, but probably more relevant to my solo album, were the albums by Joe Perry from Aerosmith.
Wow.
I don't know
and
that
Steve,
one. Yeah.
And Steve Perry from Journey.
Steve Perry, yeah,
Wow.
of course.
He's also one of my favourite vocalists. So
Yeah.
honourable mentions.
What is that Joe Perry one like? I've seen the cover before because it's like sort of a famous cover, but I don't know the album at all.
He panders a lot to his love of the British blues explosion and that kind of era. So, yeah, it does feel like a very British blues album, which is really interesting actually, and not very Aerosmith at all. So I love it. Yeah, it's really cool. But obviously, the Let the Music Do the Talking did actually become an Aerosmith song.
Yeah, that's right.
In the end.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, okay. Well, I think these lists were very cool. It was a nice sort of different kind of look at some music here. I like what we talked about on this one. Very cool stuff.
Yeah, I've got a lot of homework now.
Yeah. No, I'm serious. We need to set up a file sharing so we can check some of these out. Well, again, guys, well, we should also say Haken has a tour coming next year, right? So
That's true. Yeah, we're in Europe in February. So yeah, if you're European or you can travel there, do come and see us. That'll be great. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. We're planning on doing Vector and Virus in fall at the finale show.
Oh wow!
So that should be quite special.
Cool.
Yeah.
Amazing. That's gonna be awesome. And yes, again, solo album comes out on November 19th. rjsolo.com. Check it out, pick it up, and yeah, that's it. All right, we'll see you everybody soon. Again, follow Prog Report on Facebook, Twitter, subscribe to YouTube here, follow us on progreport.com and all that, and we'll see you again very soon. Peace.